Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1009, Thursday, January the 9th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so yesterday I started off by telling you about that crazy video of Ayatollah, Khomeini having a major meltdown. Now, as it turns out, Bill Steele did a retraction on that video and is saying that that is not Khomeini, that it's some other Iranian camel jockey having a meltdown. But, okay, so it's not Khomeini. But regardless of whether it's Khomeini or not, it's still the most outrageous meltdown I've ever seen by any leader, let alone an Iranian or anyone else. I've never seen anyone quite melt down like that. So, yeah, a retraction on yesterday's story. That was not Khomeini. It's another, again, as I said, another Iranian camel jockey. I'm not sure which one, but it doesn't matter. It is an Iranian leader of some respect melting down like I have never seen before. Still worth watching, regardless of who it is. But it was not Khomeini, and it's not related to what's going on now. It's something from another time. But that's okay. It's still funny as hell. Now, let's get on to the current actual Iranian situation. So now here we are, 24 hours removed from where we were yesterday. And it looks like now that this entire thing was the response by Iran was nothing more than a face-saving measure. We found out now that the Iranians had contacted Iraq prior to launching those missiles and told Iraq that they were going to do it, at which point they passed that information along to us, so we knew it was coming, and they would have known that. So they wanted to make sure we knew it was coming so we could prepare. Then you have Zarif, the foreign minister, coming out making a statement immediately afterward that, well, this is our response and this is basically it and we don't want any further escalation. This is our response. In other words, telling us that this is all they're going to do. Now, I don't believe that. I believe that they're going to continue. They probably are working on a plan now for some more typical things that they do, like, using proxies and things and such. But as far as a direct launching missiles out of Iran at Americans or American assets, I think that they're pretty much not going to do that. But it really shows you, and of course we know that the missiles really didn't get very close to their target. I think there may have been 2 or 3 that landed somewhere within the vicinity of the base, but most of them were outside the parameters of the base there, and that tells you that they had no interest in actually hitting any real targets because, the Iranian missiles are, they're more accurate than that. They could definitely hit their mark. We know that because several months ago they launched 2 ballistic missiles at a Saudi Arabian refinery, and both those missiles hit their target, bullseyes. So we know that if the Iranians wanted to actually hit the barracks on that base, they could have put the missiles right into the barracks and actually killed people. Clearly, they did not want to cause any deaths or probably even injuries. They want to make sure the missiles didn't get anywhere near where people would be sleeping or working or whatever. The only ones that hit close to the base or within the boundaries of the base were in the far outskirts of the base, out in the field somewhere, and then the rest of them were outside the base. So they had no intention of actually really doing anything. But on our Iranian TV was reporting that they killed, well, I've heard 2 different reports, one 30 and another 80 Americans in the strike. So clearly this was all intended as nothing more than a face-saving measure. And it's a huge, huge loss for the Iranians because we took out their chief strategist, their chief tactician that runs all their foreign proxies. And there is no one in line to replace him at this point, Soleimani. There's no one even close. He was clearly their top tacticianer, and that's why they're crying so much. They know they have nobody even close to his skill level to replace him. It's a huge, huge setback. Could set him back many years because Soleimani had all those. He was the one that ran all that. He had all the contacts. He had all the strategy. He had the whole organization that he ran. And he had nothing really much to do with the regular Iranian military or Republican Guard. It was the proxies that he ran, and so it's going to take someone a long time, even if they're pretty skilled. It will take them a long time to, take over the organization and then try to recover from what's happened, and then try to run it the way that he did, because had been doing that for over 20 years. So, yeah, it was a huge, huge loss. And that's why the Iranians are really crying. But it's a huge win for Trump, because clearly it shows one major thing, which is that the Iranians are terrified of Trump. Too terrified to even respond when we take out their most skilled tacticianer. They're too terrified to respond. They have to almost apologize for the tepid response that they gave, and practically beg us not to hit them in regards to that. So definitely a huge, huge loss for the Iranians, and really a big win for Trump, because it really gave him an opportunity. Not that we want the opportunity to come about as a result of an American or others being killed or wounded by an Iranians or anyone else. It's not, the way you want it to happen, but the fact that it happened and Trump responded the way he did, as big and bold as he did, to hit a target like that, it shows the Iranians that Trump does mean business, and he is not Obama, he is not Bush, he is not certainly not Carter. He's none of those things. He is someone who, if he tells you he's going to hit you, he's going to hit you. And if he says he's got 52 targets, he would probably hit him if he felt like it. So there's no question that this shows that the Iranians certainly fear Trump, and unlike we haven't had a leader that they feared since Reagan. They feared Reagan as well, but they certainly didn't fear Bush. They didn't fear Obama. Certainly didn't fear Clinton, obviously. Didn't fear Carter, obviously. So it's been a long time since we've had a president that they really were terrified of, and I think they're more terrified of Trump than they even were of Reagan. So, yes, it was a huge fail on behalf of the Iranians, and Trump looks pretty damn good on the other side of it. Well done again, President Trump. He just continues to prove that his instincts are absolutely incredible. I have never seen an individual who has those type of instincts, the ability to read people the way he can. I don't know if that's a gift or a skill he developed, or where that comes from, that this dude is flat out, he is dialed in to the art of reading people, and his intuition is just extraordinary. So, well done. Now, it's turning out to be a really bad week for the Iranians, in addition to losing their top tacticianer and having to do a very tepid response as a safe-facing measure, clearly giving Trump a major victory here. In addition to that, now we have a problem with this Ukrainian airliner that went down 8 minutes after takeoff, leaving Iran, and it was about 60 some odd Canadians. Of the 170 some odd people there, there was like 60 Canadians and 5 or 6 Brits. So it wasn't just Ukrainians or Middle Easterners on that flight. 60 some odd Canadians, 5 Brits, and I guess other people, maybe certainly Ukrainians, because it was a Ukrainian Airlines flight. Now, everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. Now, I'm sure most of you have seen the video clip by now of that little orange fireball that was the plane crashing. Now, another thing we're learning now is that what happened here is that after 8 minutes after takeoff, the plane just goes dark. It stops sending data. And that tells you, because if you have a malfunction on the plane, an engine goes bad or whatever, keep in mind the 737-800 has 2 engines. One engine goes bad or catches fire, they have the ability to put out the fire. They turn off the engine. They have an actual fire extinguisher situation that they can extinguish the fire. They put the fire out. They shut off the engine. They fly on one engine. They're fine. Planes fly on one engine all the time when they need to. I've been on a plane one time that had to fly on one engine when one caught fire. So the fact that this plane goes from having no problems, reporting no problems, to all of a sudden, boom, it just completely goes black, stops sending data. The sending of data continues whether there's a malfunction or not. and it just stopped all at once. Boom. That indicates a catastrophic something. And of course, you know, like a plane that blows up or something that just, boom, it just, you know, blows up, stops sending data. And it wasn't just like an engine malfunction. The pilots never reported anything. There was nothing apparently wrong with the plane. So I guess a lot of people are speculating, and I kind of in agreement with this, that what must have happened here is that, of course, when the Iranians decided to launch those missiles, they obviously would have at the same time, assuming that there might be a return fire on the site that launched the missiles, they probably activated their anti-aircraft systems, and that plane they probably didn't check. One of two things: either they didn't check to see if there's any civilian flights in the area, any aircraft in the area, and those systems that they have are set to automatically launch. Once they're turned on and put on standby or whatever, they'll automatically launch on a target when they find it. Or else it's another type of system where the field commander actually has to launch, and maybe you had some crazy Iranian who heard a jet and maybe was paranoid, thinking it was an American jet or something that was going to, you know, drop a bomb on them, or a drone or something, and they may have freaked out. Some battlefield commander may have freaked out and launched. But it appears that that plane may have been taken down by, you know, the Iranians in an accident, believing it was something else or a malfunction in the system or something happened, but it looks like it may have been a missile that took that plane down. Now, obviously, there'll be whatever authorities in that, like we have the FAA here, I don't know what authority it is there, but there'll be some, you know, air authority that will want to come and examine the crash site. The Iranians are saying they're not going to turn over the black box. I don't know how effective they're going to be at that. It's a Ukrainian plane. The Boeing is going to want that box. The Ukraine government is going to want that box. The Ukraine company that owns and flies the airplane is going to want that box. The investigative bureau, whoever that is in the region, is going to want that box, and they're going to want to examine the airplane. But even if they don't get the box, you should be able to look at the airplane. A professional investigator will look at that airplane, and they'll be able to figure out pretty quickly if it was some sort of an engine malfunction or some other system malfunction, or whether it was hit with a missile. You can tell when a plane's been hit with a missile. There's a large black burn, a lot of burning, scorched metal, and a big ass hole. So they'll be able to figure it out. And if it turns out that the Iranians accidentally shot down this Ukrainian aircraft, and keep in mind, they're going to have to get to the bottom of it, because there's going to be a lot of lawsuits. Somebody, the victims of those people killed in that plane, are going to be going for lawsuits to sue whoever's responsible. And so they're going to have to get to the bottom of who's responsible so they can be sued. And it might end up being the Iranians, which would make for a really, really bad week. And then, if it doesn't get any worse than that, right after that happens, they have an earthquake. They have an earthquake, like a 5.4 or something. But, you know, that's a pretty bad week for the Iranians. Your number one best tactician for your foreign operations gets, let's say, what's a good word to use? Well, he is vaporized. How about that? Your top tactician is vaporized. You accidentally shoot down another country's airplane and kill 170 some odd people. That's not good. And then, of course, you have an earthquake. If I was the Iranians, I'd quit while I was ahead. They're not having a very good week. Not having a good week. Okay, so let's move on to some other news of the day. Well, again, here we have Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele caught in another lie. I mean, this guy's a pathological liar. And he just appeared at a function about a week ago. So he's now kind of getting back out in public again. He maybe should go back underground. I mean, this guy is just a pathological liar. I mean, there's just nothing more you can say about it. This guy just lies a lot. So it appears that Christopher Steele told the Inspector General, Huckleberry Horowitz, that he had not conducted any research on Trump before being hired by Confusion GPS. Says he had not conducted any research on Trump before being hired by Confusion GPS. But unfortunately, transcripts show that he told the Senate Judiciary the exact opposite. He told the Senate Judiciary Committee that he was compiling evidence on Trump before he was hired by Confusion GPS. He lied to somebody, either the Senate or to the Inspector General. Yeah, this guy needs to be, Durham needs to, indict Christopher Steele. Tell the British government, you're going to have to send him over here for putting his ass in front of a jury. And this guy was deeply involved in a attempted coup of an American president. It's time for him to face the music. He's been getting treated with kid gloves since day one. This guy's dirty, he's corrupt, and he's a pathological liar. And it's time to bring him to justice. I hope John Durham does that, and the British government needs to fully cooperate. But it gets better. Oh yes, for me anyway, and Lee Smith. Christopher Steele also says that the information that he received from his final reports, of which there were 2, associated with his October 19th release, came from the U.S. State Department and was the second report that came from a subsource who was in touch with the State Department, who was in contact with a friend of the Clintons. Who's he talking about? He's talking about Jonathan Weiner and Cody Shearer, or Sidney Blumenthal. They're kind of one and the same. He says, came from the U.S. State Department and was the second report that came from a subsource, that would be Jonathan Weiner, who was in touch with the State Department, who was in contact with a friend of the Clintons, that would be either Cody Shearer or Blumenthal, one of the two, as Lee Smith and yours truly has been saying for a very long time. The Clinton associates were actually the ones feeding Steele. It was home cooked. Home cooked. As Lee Smith points out in his book, and these people need to all go read Lee Smith's book. Apparently they have not read Lee Smith's book, because he shows you in the book. He don't tell you. He shows you. He's got the proto-dossiers. He shows you the proto-dossier, a couple paragraphs in the proto-dossier, then he shows you a Steele report. It's the same thing, just heavily embellished. He's absolutely correct. The dossier was created by Glenn Simpson and his wife, taking research they had done from back in 2007. They mixed that with some stuff that Nellie Orr was getting from her open source research. They mixed that in. Then we had Cody Shearer and Blumenthal, Hillary's buddies, giving him stuff that ended up getting compiled into there. And it appears, now I thought that Shearer and Blumenthal were probably feeding it to Fusion GPS, but it looks like now they were actually feeding it to Steele through Weiner. But it's still coming from Clinton's henchmen. And then Weiner would pass it on to the State Department. From Steele would go to the State Department, or Weiner would go directly to the State Department, and it would go from there to Simpson. It's all circular stuff. It's that small little group of people, Simpson and his wife, Nellie Orr, Mr. Baumgartner working with Nellie, Shearer and Blumenthal, and probably the Rotten Reverend and Podesta and a couple of guys sitting around her kitchen getting drunk and dreaming up some of their own stuff. And we know this because it was all in the proto-dossiers. It was all out there before Steele even was hired, regardless of when he started doing the research. This was literally a home-cooked deal. There were no Russians. It's all made up. All made up. Wait till John Durham discovers that it was the Rotten Reverend Clinton and the people she hired who were working for her. She was paying them. They were Hillary Clinton's employees that created the dossier, that spread the dossier into the State Department, into the FBI, and throughout the media and everywhere else. This was a rotten Reverend Clinton operation, planned, organized, directed, and controlled by her. She was running this entire damn thing. And eventually, Mr. Durham is going to discover that if he has not already. And there'll be many in the media, when this all comes out, are going to go, wow, so it appears that Clinton was behind it the whole time. Yeah! Who benefited from all this? Clinton. Who paid for it? Clinton. Who were all these people working for? Clinton. Who has the type of position to have that type of access and ability? Clinton. Everything, you follow every trail, they all go back to Clinton. She knows Downer. She knows Misfit. She knows Halper. I mean, God, she's connected to everything and everybody in this entire scheme. Man, I wish people would just sit and look at this and think about it. Yes, Comey and McCabe and Strzok and all these people, they're all a bunch of dupes. They were simply gobbling up what was being fed to them. But the person who was doing the feeding was the rotten Reverend and her associates, her employees, people working for her. And she's the mastermind here. Unless she wants to say that Mr. Sussman and Mark Elias and Perkins Coie were running the entire show and she didn't know about it. Is that what she's going to say? And what's Sussman and the other clown going to say? Yeah, well, we were running everything, and the rotten Reverend didn't know about any of it. Yeah, we were running the whole damn show, and the rotten Reverend didn't know about anything. She's just out there campaigning for president, paying $12 million. Knows nothing about what's going on. Yeah, it was me, Sussman and Elias, us two. We're the guys. We decided everything from Perkins Coie, and the rotten Reverend just sitting back there doesn't know anything. Right. Perkins and Coie also were working for the rotten Reverend Clinton. Mark Elias and Sussman were working for the rotten Reverend Clinton. They were essentially her employees too. Everybody was working for the rotten Reverend. On whose behalf? The rotten Reverend. My goodness, it's not that hard. It's really not. Well, it looks like Diane Turn In Your Guns, Mr. and Mrs. America Feinstein, is fed up with Madame Botox. So even Turn In Your Guns, Mr. and Mrs. America Feinstein, a radical left-wing Democrat in the Senate, is not happy, and she's fed up with Pelosi's tactics, demanding that Madame Botox send the articles of impeachment to the Senate. But even with that, Pelosi is still refusing. I guess when the 12th comes around, we'll find out what happens. Maybe she wants it to be dismissed. And then she can say, see, the Senate Republicans wouldn't even allow it to happen. They dismissed it. They're a bunch of partisans. She would rather look like a complete damn fool and try to turn this into a partisan fight than present the articles. That's how bad they are. Either way, she looks like an idiot. I don't know how she survives this. I really don't. Not only that, we find out that Madame Botox, just after the Trump administration learns that the Iranians are going to be launching attacks on U.S. positions in Iraq, Mike Pence calls Nancy Pelosi to advise her, because she wants to be advised of all these things. So he calls to inform her, and he gets a staffer, and the staffer says, hey, tells Pelosi, hey, I got Mike Pence on the phone, says it's important, and she says, tell him I'll call him back. Tell him I'll call him back. And why is that? Because she was at a local D.C. restaurant at a party celebrating the opening of a new restaurant in the District of Criminals. She was probably drunker than a monkey. God almighty. It's just hard, I'm sorry, but I mean, I've been following DC politics for a very long time, over 40 years, well over that, and I've never seen. I'm trying to go back to my mind, and there's been some crazy Democrats, but I'm just going back in my mind of Democrats in senior leadership positions, I cannot, in my mind, going back, think of any in my lifetime that are as nutty as Madame Botox. She's completely nuts, man. I mean, it's the only reason she can possibly survive is because she controls where the money goes in the party, and she's got she's got the media protecting her. I mean, if they were covering her honestly, she would probably have already been driven out of her speakership. I think she's senile, personally. Well, it looks like we have Ruth Bader Ginsburg coming out and telling us that she is now cancer-free, and that's fantastic. I am very happy that she's cancer-free. I don't want to see... I want to see her retire, because I think she's too damn old to be on the court, but and too liberal, but, you know, I mean, that's her call, not mine. I'm glad she's cancer-free, and I'm happy to hear that. But I would like to know, personally, just from my own curiosity, if she is formaldehyde-free. Formaldehyde-free. I want to know if she's been getting injected with formaldehyde. I want to test. I want to know, is Ginsburg formaldehyde-free? Well, the Senate is seeking the records and testimony from Biden advisor Amos Hochstein, because he told Biden in 2015 about Hunter Biden's sweetheart deal with Burisma. Yeah, so again, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of documentation, a lot of people who talked to Biden about this. And we've already heard that there have been people advised, people in his office, but he's denied that he personally was told. So if we find out that this is true, and this guy, Amos Hochstein, did tell Biden to his face about the sticky situation with his son and Burisma, that would mean Burisma Joe was lying, which, of course, I'm sure he is. But we've already learned that there were people who went to his staffers and told them, and at the time, it was right after his other son, Beau, had just died of brain cancer, and they said, hey, this is a bad time to be talking about all this. You know, Beau just died of brain cancer, and Joe's probably not ready to handle something like that right now with Hunter, so just put a lid on it. So we know there were attempts made to tell him personally. We know his staff was absolutely informed, and that they, at some point, someone on his staff would have had to have relayed that. They would have been obligated to. They work for him. That's their obligation. But, you know, Grassley and Johnson are in the middle of this investigation, and at some point, they're going to, along with what Giuliani's come up with and all this other stuff, I don't know how much longer Burisma Joe can fight this momentum that continues to build about his corrupt dealings with Ukraine and China and other places. At some point, it's going to hit pay dirt and catch up to him. Now, think about what a disaster things could be for the demo commies if, in fact, Biden does win the nomination. He wins the nomination, and then at some point between winning the nomination and the vote in November 2020, we get the facts and the details about all he was involved in, and we find out that he is, you know, in a lot of trouble. In addition to that, Durham is going to be finishing his investigation, and Biden is up to his eyeballs in Spygate. Biden was in, and he can't claim, oh, I didn't know anything about it. I was out of the loop. I didn't know anything about all that. He can't claim that. He cannot claim that. Thanks to Susan Rice and her Cover Your Ass letter, because in her Cover Your Ass letter, she names Joe Biden as being in that January 5th meeting. He was there, where they discussed the entire thing. They discussed the entire thing. Not only did they discuss all that they had been doing, but they discussed how that they could continue doing it after Trump came into office. That's what the meeting was about. How do we continue this and keep it hidden from the Trump campaign? And how do we make sure that this all gets out? He was there for the whole thing. the Democrats, if they're smart, they will see this and think, man, this Burisma stuff is eventually going to hit pay dirt. And he's also involved in the Spygate. Durham's obviously going to nail him on that. We better get Joe out of the game. He could be so badly wounded by the time the general election starts that he would probably have to step aside and allow someone else, someone maybe the Rotten Reverend, to jump in and fill his shoes. Never count out the Rotten Reverend and never count on Burisma Joe. He's a loser. Papadopoulos is saying that a congressional committee, one, he will not name which one, but a congressional committee has requested documents that only he has that exposes the spying scandal. He says he's very pleased with the direction the investigation is going and the leads that are being chased down. Yeah, that's very good news. And I think if I haven't mentioned, I probably should mention it. You know, I've been noticing that if you look at where Durham has really been focusing, it's almost like he read Papadopoulos' book, and he probably has read Papadopoulos' book, because if you look at the key places where Durham has been focusing, it's all the places and people that were associated with Papadopoulos. Durham goes to Italy a couple times. Well, that would be in association about Misad, which that would be in relation to Papadopoulos. He goes to Australia. Well, that would have been about Downer. And, of course, that would be associated to Papadopoulos. He goes to London. Well, a lot of things going on in London, but certainly Papadopoulos. He goes and talks to Tobias Ellwood. Obviously, that would be something that would be relating to Papadopoulos. So, clearly, John Durham is following along the pathway, the same pathway that Papadopoulos traveled back in 2016. And that seems to be where he's focused quite a bit of energy. Because, of course, it was the so-called meeting with Papadopoulos and Downer that led to the start of Operation Crossfire Hurricane. Or so they say. Of course, we all know that's bullshit. Now, Papadopoulos also says, quote, the transcript of my meeting with Alexander Down the Hatch Downer, when released, will confirm that Downer and the Australian government were willfully spying on me. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. Margot Cleveland points out in her most recent article that Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz said in his report that the FBI did not use confidential informants or undercover agents before July 31st, 2016. Well, that's a problem, because there were confidential informants being used prior to July 31st, 2016, long before July 31st, 2016. So one of two things is going on here. Either the FBI simply destroyed the documentation and evidence that would prove that, or these confidential informants were working for somebody else. The Inspector General report also says that the FBI did not have access to databases of U.S. intelligence agencies. Really? They didn't? Well, then how were they able to provide that access to private contractors? You're saying that the FBI had the ability to provide private contractors with access to the NSA database, but they themselves did not? I don't think so. That's not adding up at all. And Horowitz also says that they only had limited access to other agencies. In other words, the State Department. They only had limited access to the State Department, because there's a lot of the things, a lot of this stuff was pipelined through the State Department. Durham can get anything he wants from the State Department, and I'm sure he's exercising that authority. But here you can see there's a lot of problems with the IG report, and when Durham is done with his investigation, I think the IG report and the Mueller investigation are going to become completely, historically irrelevant. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. Guys, have a good night. See ya. Bye.